The top stories on today's Reuters Breakingviews. What's investment banks' next challenge? Cutting salaries. And VW relaunches its mandatory convertible market. Helping us drive our way through these stories this morning is Breakingviews economics editor Chris Hughes. Chris, thanks for joining us once again. Let's start with the investment bank's next challenge, cutting salaries. Historically, this comes back to 2009 and a mistake being made.
That's right. When you saw banks come under all this regulatory pressure to tackle the way they paid bankers in view of the havoc caused by the crisis, their response was, okay, well, if there's going to be an attack on bonuses, what we'll do is we'll pay bankers more in salary and less in bonuses. So, whatever we're made to do with bonuses, defer them, pay in buttons or whatever they were supposed to do, wasn't then going to put them at risk of losing their best staff. Now, this tactic may well have sort of worked, if you like, if markets had held up and revenues were strong and the banks could afford to do this. But unfortunately, what's happened is that they're now left with this very high fixed cost from all these higher salaries, which is a problem.
And now it's gone up to from 37% to 55% of banks' compensation.
Yeah,
this study. I mean, that's a major move.
It's a real burden, and the pressure on banks' costs is only getting worse because you've got multiple forces at work on the business model. You've got weak revenues, obviously, they've got to hold more capital. So something's got to give. But obviously, having given people new contracts with higher salaries, it's quite hard to make that give. So what do? Well, there's not much they can do. They can wait for natural turnover and replace staff with new people on more normal contracts, if you like. Or what they might be able to do, and this is quite hard to imagine, but they might be able to say, look, if you take an analogy with, say, a manufacturing plant, look, this just isn't working. We can't afford to pay you what we've promised. We're going to have a sort of collective agreement that we're all going to take less. Otherwise, there may be job cuts. We've seen that we've seen that in car plants.
Yeah.
And
you've seen it at UBS. So amongst the banks, UBS have taken one view, which is we're going to take out fixed income effectively, and that's very painful. I hate to say it, but Goldman Sachs, again, a little bit more far-sighted and have actually inserted some contract clauses, you're saying. And I understand, I'm not sure if this has been confirmed, that there were one or two of the directors of Goldman Sachs who were prepared to go back down to being a normal human being again, just to keep their job. But I mean, that fits in with what you're saying.
Well, what goes on at the top levels of Goldman, I mean, people do actually silently drift in and out of being partners without it ever being, the attention being drawn to it for obvious reasons. But yeah, Goldman actually was far-sighted here. They, our understanding is that they actually built in little kind of reversibility clauses when they up fixed salaries. Unfortunately, it looks like the rest of the pack were not so clever. And so what we're probably going to see over the coming months, especially as we hit bonus time now, is there's going to be some very, very tough negotiations with staff where there's a lot of arm twisting and probably some staff will try and call the employer's bluff and say, well, if you try and make me do that, I'll leave, and we'll see whether they really do.
But this is what it comes down to. As a layman, and you're much closer to this than me, this phrase about, if we cut staff or we cut salaries, they'll all leave and go somewhere else. Really?
Well,
in this day and age?
Right now, the question is, where is the somewhere else? I don't think it's going to be UBS for a start, and if you look at UBS's shares up 20%, that's going to put a lot of pressure on other banks to amputate their fixed income units as well. So this is not a tight labour market. So threats, look, the best people will always be able to make that threat credibly. But there is a limited number of jobs out. This is a shrinking industry. Finance is a shrinking industry.
Okay, well, from one shrinking industry to another, but this one comes with a bit of a timing issue. Volkswagen, very successful German car maker, and Spanish and Italian cars everywhere, relaunching its mandatory convertible market. Now, the puns are tripping off the tongue, but I won't do it. This is timing. This is timing as far as you're concerned.
Yeah, I mean, look, we haven't seen a big mandatory convertible issue for quite a while, and suddenly, bang, 2.5 billion euros hits the market. I mean, it draws attention to, why an issuer like VW can do this. Clearly we know why they want to do it. Their credit ratings somewhat under pressure because they've been buying a lot of stuff. So they need to do something to take the pressure off their credit rating. And now they could just place shares, but
5.5% coupon, very attractive.
And this convertible lapped up by investors. It seems it's a cheaper way of getting some rating benefit than placing straight shares. I won't go into the complex maths behind it, but essentially it inflicts less dilution on shareholders. It inflicts some, but I mean less than if they just did a massive, great share issue right away. And you can see why investors want to buy it, because if there's an economic recovery, then in theory, an automaker like VW ought to see its shares outperform into that. So look out for other big issuers where their credit rating's under pressure. They've got a good share price story. You might see some more mandatory converts coming out.
Okay, thank you very much, ND, for that. Thanks as always to Chris Hughes. To find out whether France can keep its AAA credit rating, watch our interview with Fitch Ratings' Edward Parker. That's already on the platform. I'm Nigel Stevenson. This is Reuters. The top stories on today's Reuters Breaking Views. What's investment bank